Hello, my name is Raul Cisneros, and today in class we'll be discussing is the expansion of the United States. But in today's lesson, we'll be looking at how society would change, and more specifically, music had changed in the United States. For today's lesson, I would like you all to keep in mind some of the different cultures that would be here in America. They would either have already been, a foundation here, or they would immigrate from here. So some of the immigrant cultures that would come here would be the Irish, the Czechs, and the Germans. And some of the ones that have already been here before them would be the Native Americans and the African Americans. So our timeline would be from 1877 to 1898. So that timeline should already tell you that we're past the Civil War. So we're in this time of Reconstruction. That's what it is called. And we will also be discussing an important figure in music, which would be Antonin Dvorak. He's a Bohemian composer. He would come here and live in America for 2 years, and during his 2 years, he would get a job at the New York Conservatory, and he would be tasked with finding the American sound. So let's stop before we get there. What is the American sound? And let's ask what this other question is: which culture do you think would have a major role in creating this sound? So the American sound. So for context, over in Europe, there's already a big following and a big explosion of music that would be coming, and the most popular music that would be played at this time, which would be opera. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of opera. And during this time, a lot of the American composers and artists would be copying and trying to learn the style of these European composers, such as Mozart, Rossini, Verdi, all these guys, right? And eventually, there would be critics that would just say that the American music is just the same as what was going on in Europe. So when Antonin Dvorak came here, the New York Conservatory would task him to find the American sound. What is a music that was born here, something that can be born here and was different from what was going on in Europe? So that is the American sound, something that is native to here. Now, the other question, which would be, which culture do you think would have a major role in creating this sound? So we have a lot of cultures that would be coming into America. So as they say, it's the melting pot. That's what they would call the United States. So we have the Native Americans, the African Americans, we have the Irish, the Czechs, and the Germans, and also some of the other European countries, cultures that would be coming in here. So this is just a question of what you would think would have the most influence. So for today's objectives, we'll be explaining the different cultures that would help and shape the American sound in music. We'll also be able to describe where most of this change would occur, and we'll also be able to understand the importance of the West and Antonin Dvorak in creating this American sound. So class, today I'll be giving you a article, and this article would be called Antonin Dvorak and the American Connection. So for the first part, we're going to be going to this subtitle here called Dvorak Attempting to Predict the Future of American Music. So in here we'll have some quotations that are not as appropriate for today, but these are some quotations that were here. I'm going to blur out one of the words that are here, but as we read, do keep that in mind that this is a different time period. I am now satisfied, Dvorak quoted to journalist James Crewman, that the future music in this country must be founded upon what are called melodies. This must be the real foundation of any serious and original school of composition to be developed in the United States. That statement sounds innocuous, and to those who grew up in the 20th and 21st century. But in the 1893, such claim was about as innocuous as the impending Spanish-American War. So in here, this author talks, Dvorak talks about these melodies, and the melodies he's quoting is these melodies created by these minority groups, which would be the African Americans and the African Americans. And Dvorak believed that the origin of, or how do I say, the music of America would come from the African Americans, because a lot of them had came from these plantations and they would come out of slavery, and in this they would create music in the form of spiritual hymns, and these hymns would be considered folk songs that many of the people would start singing as we were going out west. So in here, Dvorak would say, these are the folk songs of America, and your composers must turn to them. So, of course, on many of the American composers that had already been here, they would not take too kindly to this. And why do you think they would not take too kindly to this? Yes, it's because we are just coming out of the Civil War, and there's still some of these held up, feelings and sentiments about these minority groups. And this will still go on until the Civil War or Civil Rights Movement, all the way until 1965 and even into today. So all these problems that we're facing today, they were just as prevalent as back then. So we're in the time of Reconstruction, and some of the composers that would find a problem with what Antonin Dvorak said would be, William Henry Fye, Louis Gottschalk, George Chadwick, and Amy Beach. And a lot of these composers would have a problem because they said, what about these other cultures, these European cultures that came in and, were just influential? So here we're going to be reading a quote. Is Dr. Dvorak is probably unacquainted with what was already been accomplished in the higher forms of music by composers in America. And in my estimation, it is a preposterous idea to say that in the future, American music will rest upon such an alien foundation as the melodies of a yet largely undeveloped race. So here we go again. We see all this, prejudice and all this discrimination that these guys hold. Eventually, we're going to go on to Harry T. Burleigh and his influence on Dvorak. So we're going to be talking about another figure named Burleigh. And Burleigh was an African American singer, and he would join Dvorak in the National Conservatory of Music of America, and he would be his student. And Dvorak, one day, he would hear Burleigh sing these spiritual hymns. And in this, Dvorak was very interested. He wanted to see what was this about, what was the origins of this music. And this is where Dvorak would get this idea. And he would say that this was the origin of the American sound. Okay, class. So for this, I'll be assigning you guys into groups. There'll be 3 groups, and each of the groups will get a different article. And in these articles, I would like you guys to read them and also summarize and also separate the different main points and ideas and the different cultures you would see in these articles. And afterwards, you guys will present, and we'll be comparing and contrasting, which culture is the most definite, or which culture had the most influence in today's music as we would go on.